Hello, and it is time for our second session of our webinar. And the recording is going already, so I'm going to let it go, but I want to do a little bit of check-in with us before we actually get started with the main event here. One of the things that you always hear me saying is, I want to rush through this. I want to get all this material in. There's so much material here. And there really is a lot of material. But I'm going to do things a little differently today. And instead of trying to rush through all the material, I'm going to cut the material back and give us some more time to connect with each other. Second thing I'm going to do is I've got a couple of slide presentations for you, but they're purposely incomplete. And what I want us to do together is complete these as we're going along. And so I've never done either one of these things before, so I'm hoping this is going to work. We are, this is just an overview for those who are understanding that this is the second session that we've got. I hope that you've looked at the first session. At the very least, thumb through it enough to get familiarized with it. If you, I see a number of us were on the first session, so we won't have too much of a difficulty. I also hope that you either were participating in or reviewed the Dream of the Butterfly, because that entire section of tonight's presentation I'm not presenting because we did it already. So hopefully you've had a chance to look at the video, The Dream of the Butterfly, so that you can be familiarized with this notion of the metamorphosis of a society, that the society that we will be birthing won't necessarily look or act anything like the society we've got right now. So I've got my fingers crossed that we're going to be up to speed on all of this stuff, and that this will make sense not only for those of us who are on the call right now, but also for those who may be watching this 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years from now. So we'll see how all that goes. As the technical parts of this, we are going to stop at 9 o'clock. And for those of you who can hang in here that long, thank you. For those of you who have to check out at our break at the top of the hour, thank you. And I will get you the slide. I mean the video link for this call at a later date. Later date being hopefully a day or two from now. I think that's all of the details. I guess one thing, and I'm seeing a couple of new names up here. I want to say that, I'll be talking for some time, maybe 40, 45 minutes or so, and then I'm going to open it up to questions, comments, thoughts, etc. The way that you get recognized for a question is to raise your hand. Now, raising your hand means, and there should be a bunch of buttons down here, and you should push the button that says Manage Participants, and I think that then takes you, my screen is different from yours, I think that then takes you to a place where it says raise your hand. What I want you to do right now is raise your hand to see whether you can do that or not. And I can see when your hand goes up that your hand, that you've got the right button. And at this point in time, there's only one of you that's got that. And I will, I'm waiting for some others of you to hit the magic button at the bottom. And I'm not seeing any other hands besides Matthew's. And so, the second way of getting my attention is to right now all of the screens besides mine are blanked. Is to unblank your screen to turn on your video, and to actually wave your meat hand around, and I will see you see you that way. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. The first session that we had, we walked through some steps. We talked about standing in truth, refusing to accept the consensual lie that is fostered to us by society, but because all of us participate in the lie belongs to all of us, and we need to stop lying to ourselves, stop lying to each other, and then start living in truth. That we can awaken our consciousness, and I spend a lot of time talking about consciousness. I've got lots of other videos talking about consciousness. Look them up. Oh, I'm sorry, let me give a commercial right now. For those of you who haven't done it, if you can go to my YouTube channel and subscribe to it. That absolutely guarantees that you're going to get a notice as soon as every video comes out. Okay, so if you're tired of waiting for me to get a notice out, etc., one thing that you can do for yourself is to go and subscribe to the YouTube channel. I don't post videos that often, so you're not going to get blasted with a whole lot of messages, and hopefully the ones I do are going to be ones that are going to be meaningful for you. We also talked about seeing reality, and we talked about the 12 global challenges. We're going to come back to them today, but we're going to look at them in a very different kind of way, and I'm going to ask for your help in helping to evolve the 12 global challenges. And one of the other things we talked about was your understanding your responsibility to act in the world, and that what that means is empowering yourself by taking that responsibility. We talked about crossing the dragon's gate, to be able to actually face our fears, stop acting like we're not afraid, because if you're not afraid, you're not paying attention. Okay, we're at the crux of humanity that we've never ever been at this planet before, and we are the ones that have the responsibility to act. So again, the third step is to dream of the butterfly. Look at the video for that. Look for the video for that. So tonight we're going to talk about walking the spirit path. And I'm going to issue a disclaimer that I always issue, but I'm going to stop issuing the disclaimer because I've been disclaiming all over the place, and some of us still just can't seem to get it. And that is, when I'm talking about the spirit path, I am not talking about the religious path. I am not talking about adhering to any particular religious doctrine, or any religious doctrine, or any particular conceptualization of the divine, the sacred, etc. That's up to you that's up to me to answer. It's up to you to answer that question of what does spirit mean to you? What does the sacred mean to you? What does the transcendent, being on a seeing a transcendent reality, what does that actually mean to you? You're the one that has to grapple with this. If you want to, we together can have a conversation about that. I would welcome that, but I'm not. It's not something I want to force on you. So if you are interested in doing something like that, of talking about spirit at a deeper level, leave me a message in the chat box. And I see that Delaney has been very diligently, as she always diligently does, filling up our chat box with a bunch of the links of the things I've just been talking about, like the link for the Dream of the Butterfly and the 12 Global Challenges, etc. So you can write in the chat box, and you can say whether you are interested or not in talking at a deeper level about what the transcendent means and how does that affect consciousness and things like that. But right now, I'm talking about how do we walk our path with a sense of the transcendent, not just clumping down the street, bumping into people, and having blinders on so that we're not paying attention to all the things that are around us. When I was writing Creating a World That Works for All, one of the things that the publisher did, because they were interested in doing this, is they sent the manuscript out to 10 readers, 10 people who just wanted the opinion of people who weren't my friends and said, oh, this is the best thing since Gone with the Wind or whatever. They wanted to get a disinterested cross section. One of the comments that came back was so 8 of the comments that came back were positive, 2 were highly critical, and one of the critical comments said, it seems like Shariff is the only person at the party that's not having any fun. And I wrote, I didn't have direct contact with these folks. So I wrote to the publisher to write to this person that Shariff said, I didn't realize this was a party. It's a party depending on how you choose to look at it. If all you want to do is see yourself and your friends having a lot of fun, then this is a great party. However, if we're choosing to look at the entire world, not just our little corner of it, we can start seeing that perhaps this isn't a party at all. Perhaps this is a funeral procession. Our ability to be in the world is a function of our consciousness. Our ability to walk in the world is a function of our mindfulness of more than just myself. I came across something just today, and this is one of my experiments. I don't know if I can show this to you. And I'm actually not going to try to do that right now. But if you go to my Facebook page, you'll see something. I think it's called it's called Encountering Another Being. And this guy's out in the woods and he's talking about seeing a deer. And he goes on for about 4 or 5 minutes talking about seeing a deer and actually seeing the deer. Not seeing his idea of the deer, not seeing his rationalizations and seeing how close this deer comes to his rationalizations, but his ability to pause, to slow down to the world of the deer, and to look eye to eye, to look heart to heart at this other being, not trying to measure it up to all the other deer he's seen in his life, not trying, oh, I can get a really good picture of this, etc. But to really ask the question, am I really here? And am I seeing this being? And most importantly, is this being seeing me? Now, when you are in the world to that extent, when you are connected to the world to that extent, then you're going to be making decisions, and the decisions you make will be the right ones. If you're not connected to these beings, and I would add human beings to that category, it's not just deer, it's not just swimming with the dolphins, okay? It's literally swimming with the kids in your neighborhood, seeing the kids in your neighborhood. That reminds me, I was on a plane some years ago, and nobody wants to be sitting next to the crying baby. But there was a baby on the plane, and that baby was happy. And the baby wanted everybody to know that the baby was happy. So the baby, I guess it was like maybe 6, 7, 8 months old, was jumping up and down in the mother's lap and was crowing, as babies will do, and smiling, etc. And this guy was just about to turn himself inside out with anger, because he was angry that the baby was making noise. Maybe he was making the baby, he was angry because the baby was happy. And what I wanted to say to him was, chill out. Okay, it's a baby. You used to be one. You used to do this. And unfortunately, airplanes are not places where you could do things like that. But I was thinking, what kind of a path is he walking where babies aren't part of it? Okay. What kind of path is he walking where people who don't look like him are not part of that path? What kind of a path is he walking where he can't see the homeless person that's in front of him? He can't see the sick person that's in front of him. He can't see a world where everybody is not sharing in the party that he's in. So what I'm saying about walking the spirit path is walking the path in such a way that the way you walk will change the world. So when on those brief times when I am actually centered and walking outside, that take the time to be centered while I'm walking outside, I will encounter people. And I don't know, and actually today was one of those days, I don't know what kind of a vibe I was giving off, but people were stopping and speaking to me. They were like, hi, how are you doing today? You know, now, Portlanders tend to do that when we have sunny days because we don't have a whole lot of them. So it's like, hey, look, the sun's shining. But it was cloudy today when I was going to the post office. And so I was like, yo, hi, how are you? How are you? How are you? And I would like to think that there is some quality of heart that people can see or people can experience. And as I was walking down the street, they were walking through it, okay? And they were having an experience of it, okay? Walking the spirit path also means that you are going to be taking effective actions to make fundamental changes. How fundamental those changes will be, we're going to talk about in a few minutes. We know what effective action looks like because we know what ineffective action looks like. The principal aspect of ineffective action, of taking action that will not be effective to make change, is not knowing what change you need to make. If you don't have a vision, if you don't have a goal, whatever you, doesn't matter what you do, whatever you do will fail. It has to fail because you have no measurement of success. This was the problem that the Occupy phenomena had. They were very, very clear about what they did not want. And they could clearly articulate what they did not want. They could not articulate they couldn't come close to what they did want. And that gap, okay, that problem meant that sooner or later they were going to disappear because they didn't know what they wanted. Following that very closely is the second problem, not knowing what you want and then not knowing how to achieve it. So let's say that you want the mythical land of milk and honey, for those of you who are not lactose intolerant, and you want everyone to be at peace with each other and walk down the beach hand in hand with great music playing in the background. But how do you actually achieve that? How do you get that going? So a lot of times ineffective action simply means that you don't know how to take an action to achieve your goal, and you don't know how to take an action because you don't even have a goal. I was in Sri Lanka some years ago when I was working with Sarvodia, and one of my unofficial jobs at Sarvodia was to shoot down the very silly ideas that people had coming to Sri Lanka, Westerners had coming to Sri Lanka. The folks at Sarvodia were just too nice to tell a person that their ideas were nonsensical, and so they would, oh, have you spoken to Mr. Shariff yet? So they'd send them to me, and I'd tell them that their ideas were nonsensical. This one person came to Sri Lanka, and she had this great idea. This is in the middle of the shooting war between the government and the Tamil Tigers that had been going on for almost 30 years at that time. And her idea was she wanted to get Sarvodia to do a program where everyone would line all the beaches all the way around the island, and they would all hold hands, and they would all sing a song together. And the holding of the hands and the singing of the song would bring peace to the island. So she had a goal, which was a vision of peace on the island, no more war. She had no idea how to achieve it, and she was arguing with me about like my idea will work, and she said people are afraid to touch each other, and if we could get them to hold hands, then they're going to be touching each other, and that will bring about peace. And I said to her, have you actually looked around this place? Everybody's always touching everybody else. I mean, you walk down the street holding hands. Well, men are holding hands with men, women are holding hands with women. And it is not, I said, Westerners have a problem touching each other, not these folks, okay? So if you want to take an action, take an effective action that is geared to the culture of the people that you're trying to work with. So point number one was not having a goal. Second point was not knowing how to achieve it. Third is taking the action that's not aligned with that vision or not aligned with the goal, like holding hands that's going to actually stop a war where two armies are facing each other and shooting at each other. And I guess the next one is one of the hardest ones for us here in the United States to get a grip on. And that is acting from anger. One of the things that I did years ago was I did a really good job at organizing around people's anger and around people's hatred. And it's actually really easy to do. It's easy to pander to that kind of energy. I think Occupy did an excellent job of organizing people's disgust with the present economic system and the economic and political systems. But if all you got is anger, you will fail. And the reason is anger really isn't a force. It's hard for me to say that all of the activism that I was involved in for the first 20 years or so of my life was based in anger and based in separation. It's hard for me to say it, but it was. Okay, that's called the reality. And once I recognized that that didn't get me anywhere, what it got me was this pit of anger stuffed down in my gut. And what it got me was a really short fuse. And what it got me was a willingness to make other people wrong, make other people bad. And there's some of us who have elevated that to an art form. Okay, so that acting from anger becomes something that becomes the only way that we can think of how to respond in the world. We've got to find ways, and there are plenty of ways of acting not out of anger, but acting out of love, compassion, caring, a sense of, and I would call this righteous indignation. Just because you don't want to act from anger doesn't mean you got to go along with the crap that's going on in the world, okay? And it doesn't mean that you don't call crap crap. What it means, though, is that you're not sitting in the pool of that in your heart, and that you are holding a vision of love and compassion and caring and focus on a vision that actually works for all beings. So this acting from anger is a big stumbling block for us. It was a big stumbling block for me, and it wasn't until I actually took my vow of nonviolence, and that took a year or so of my time to actually say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to live the life of a nonviolent person. It wasn't until then that I began to actually see the power that was inherent in love and compassion. It wasn't until then I really started looking at, how am I walking in the world? Am I walking in the world in such a way that people come alive around me, including the people that I would consider to be my opposition, the people I would consider to be my enemy? So how can I come to grips with who I am. And that way I can come to grips with those who, for whatever reason, believe that our goals are opposite to each other. Then my final point is ineffective action comes from not knowing how to win. If you don't, okay, so this is tied to the vision. Once you have the vision, you've got to understand this is the point that we win. This is the problem that I'm seeing with the Hong Kong demonstrators right now. And I'm afraid that the situation is going to end badly, because I can't figure out what exactly they want, and I can't figure out exactly how they win what they want. For those of us who remember what happened in Tiananmen Square, same situation. They were unhappy with the general society, and they were sitting in this square thinking that if we erect a statue or something like that, that this is going to change the society. That is an ineffective action, and you don't know how and you don't know how you win. This is another scenario in this was what we, as a society, as an American society, experienced in Vietnam, in the Vietnam War. The United States won virtually every battle in the Vietnam War. Every time the forces clash with each other, there's either a stalemate, or a lot of times the United States would win the battle, won battle after battle after battle, and lost the war. And because they didn't know what winning meant. Did winning mean we killed everybody? Did winning mean that the South Vietnamese army would take over and we would leave? Did winning mean we dropped nuclear weapons on them? We didn't know what that meant. And we get into a lot of physical conflicts around the world where we have no idea how to win. And the results are, well, we can see what the results are. So if we want to walk this spirit path, and we want to see what effective action looks like, it means you've got a vision, you've got a goal, you know how to achieve it. You got strategic plans on how to achieve this. You're going to take actions that are aligned with that vision, that goal, your strategies, your tactics, etc. We are not at any point in time going to be acting from anger. And if you're angry, you need to back up and check yourself before you take any further actions. And when you get to the win, when you get to actually winning, get to the point where you've achieved your goal, you have a party, you have a celebration, and you say thank you. For those of you who saw the movie Gandhi, and I've been talking about this movie enough that I'm going to be, I think I'm going to have a movie night and show Gandhi. But while he was still in South Africa, they were demonstrating for issue A. And General Smut said, okay, well, we'll give you issue A, but we're not going to give you issue B. And Gandhi said, we didn't campaign for issue B. We campaigned for issue A, so thank you very much, and he walked out. When you don't know how to win, they give you issue A. Well, I want B. You give you issue B. I want C. And that kind of an argument means you don't know what you want, and you're not satisfied. You're not fulfilled, even when you get what you've been saying that you want. a lot of this has to do with the whole issue of fulfillment. A lot of this has to do with the question of whether or not um, you are fulfilled and whether or not you can be fulfilled. Um, and I say this as a person who grew up uh, with a definitely stunted heart in a stunted family in a toxic social environment of Camden, New Jersey. I grew up with the feeling that there was something wrong, and that feeling that there was something wrong with me. And there are lots of people out in the world who were trying to convince me, yes, there is something wrong with you, and the something that's wrong with you we're going to call white power. So white people made you bad or wrong, and we need to defeat white people, and then you're going to feel good inside. We did some really amazing things in Camden. My organization, the Black People's Unity Movement, did some really amazing things, and I still am proud of some of the things that we did. Not so proud of some other things, but we're not going to talk about those tonight. But and I guess I should be more serious about this. But I'm proud of some of the things that we did. But even while we're doing things like creating daycare centers and 100 units of housing and supermarkets and restaurants and gas stations and daycare centers and the whole 9 yards, even while we're doing that, lots of us were alcoholic, lots of us were drug addicted, and it was because there was a hole here. And that hole was not created by white society. It could not be filled by the end of white society. That hole can be filled at any point in time with compassion. You having compassion for yourself, you having compassion for other people, focusing on yourself will not fill the hole by itself. So you having compassion for other people, you having compassion for our planet, you taking your heart and doing like this, okay? Now, that's really, really healing stuff. My heart looks and acts a whole lot different than it did 30, 40, 50 years ago. And until I did that, I was going to stay in the realm of being dissatisfied. I was not dissatisfied with the social conditions. I was dissatisfied with something that was inside of myself. I couldn't walk. I couldn't walk until I took this burden off of my shoulders. Once I took the burden off my shoulders, hey, I can be in the world in a very, very powerful way. So I'll say one more thing, or maybe two more things, and then I'm going to open up the lines for some questions, comments, thoughts, etc. We had an opportunity to apply all this to the situation when we were working to stop the shooting war in Sri Lanka. When I had gotten to Sarvodaya in 1995, again, the war had been going on for about 25 years. Sarvodaya had been working to end the war for 25 years and had, up until that time, failed to end the war for 25 years. Sarvodaya had this huge operation. They were putting on these massive demonstrations. And if anything, the war was getting bigger and hotter, etc. What I did was apply the steps I just finished telling you. And by doing that, so my analogy is that Sarvodaya is this huge, powerful radio. but it wasn't tuned to a station. So the only thing coming out of this radio was static, and it didn't have any effect on the war. The only thing Commonweigh did, and I'm just this little guy over there, you know, with littler people trying to make some change. And what I did was tune the radio by just changing the station a little bit. We were able to bring that war to an end within 18 months of us making the changes. So, walking down the list, the first thing was Sarvodaya had a goal, and the goal was that the Tamil Tigers would put their guns down. Now, as soon as they said that, it's like, what about the government's guns? That violence isn't one-sided. Violence, the violent parties support each other in their violence. So everybody has to put their guns down. Okay. So once we said that as a goal, a lot of our behavior changed. The second thing was, Sarvodaya was doing these massive meditations, 100,000 people, 200,000 people coming together, dressed in white, meditating for peace. No, not meditating for peace, meditating that the Tamil Tigers would put their guns down. Very ineffective goal. Very ineffective action. Once we change that so that everybody, every person that is tied to violence will stop being violent, the whole energy on the island started to change. We were able to therefore clarify and have a whole set of actions that were going to be structured directly toward achieving the goal. All of our actions were based in, and being in an organization that has a deep belief and a deep practice of nonviolent meditation was really good, so that we could constantly remove anger from ourselves and therefore be really effective. And when the shooting stopped, it stopped so abruptly, we were actually surprised. We were like, and I remember being in the office and saying, did we just win? Is the war over? And I remember Dr. Vinya saying, let's wait a week to see whether this is going to last or not. But I think we just won. And we did. And so for the 6 years after the informal end of the war, and then they formalized it with what's called a memorandum of understanding that all the parties signed. And then you could drive all over the island and nobody was killing anybody, and you could get on a bus without it blowing up. And it just was a very, very powerful time. So we've got the formula on how we can make effective change. The question, and this is the question that I always have, is who is going to be committed to doing this change? Who's going to be committed to doing this work? I'm looking at who's on the call right now. Greg has been part of this Commonweigh movement for only a couple of decades, okay? So Delaney has, I think, been on almost every call in the past couple of years that I've known her. And so the core, to have a core element that is going to make effective change, that number needs to not be 2, not be 5, not be 20. It needs to be a couple hundred. And with a couple hundred people in this country, we can start the ball rolling in a different direction. Then the question is, why don't we have a couple hundred people? and we get to answer that question as we're recruiting folks. Okay, I am going to pause right now and right here, and I'm going to ask folks to raise their hand or turn on their video if they want to ask a question, make a comment, make a statement, do shadow puppets. I am not seeing any hands going up. You can talk about, if you want to, your own walk along the spirit path. You can talk about what is it that prevents you from walking the spirit path. I still am not seeing any people, and I'm still not seeing any hands going up. And Georgina, hey, make sure you turn your microphone on.
Okay. Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, thank you. And
Good.
I'm very aware that it is time for me to step out of the work that I'm doing that's exclusively grief and anxiety treatment for people. They come, they have this anxiety going on, this grief going on. The whole planet's in grief. And so I simply wanted to join tonight to hear what you had to say, because Dr. Reverend Larry King, or Reverend Larry King, he's not a doctor, spoke at New Thought Center for Spiritual Living several weeks ago, and called each of us to become very aware of what we're thinking, what it is we're focusing on. And so I simply, and what I'm aware of is how many good things are happening out there. My focus is zero suicide. My focus is grief is open to grow. Let's do it. But we're splintered. We're splintered. And how do we come together to win the war? How do we show up honest and allow this planet to shift? We've got 8 and 13 and 17-year-olds around the globe that are stepping up. How do the rest of us do that?
It's interesting because Delaney's not exactly 8 years old, but is one of our young people, younger than me people, that's been getting interested. See a note from Matthew, who's another one of our cohort up in Olympia, who are the folks who are generating some new energy into the process. Now, so Georgina, a couple of things that you said. First of all, if you can remind me the title of your book, because we can put the link up on, Delaney's great at finding links real quick, and so we can put the link up in our chat section for those of you who don't, who would like to take a look at it.
Okay. All right. It's called A New Mourning, Discovering Your Gifts, the Gifts in Grief. And when my mouse comes back online, I will type in the title.
Okay. Yes, get your mouse together, okay?
I got to get my mouse together.
Right.
It's lost.
Right.
Goodness.
So the second thing I was going to say is, I don't know if you're familiar with Joanna Macy's writing on she wrote a book some decades ago called Despair and Empowerment in the Nuclear Age. Joanna has been a very powerful teacher for me, and we've done a lot of co-teaching and serial teaching together, and she was like, let's take a look at our own sense of despair, our own sense of empowerment. How do we get our power through our despair, through it by owning it? Okay.
Right.
Another thing that you said was zero suicide. And
Right.
in a society, I look at suicide as the canary in the mine shaft.
It is.
And I don't know if y'all saw the movie Arrival, where they're
Yes.
in the alien spaceship, and they've got all this high tech equipment and cameras, etc., and they got a canary. It's like if all this other stuff fails, we're going to see what's happening with the canary. So, and one of the things I actually said, I think this is in the preface to Creating a World That Works for All, is that our floor is littered with canaries right now. And we seem to want to blame the canaries for the problems that we've got. So that what we have to, we want to have a trite, shallow, ineffective response just to say, oh, I said something. Okay. So for example, whenever there's this mass shooting in anywhere in America, the next words out of somebody's mouth is gun control, as though gun control is going to change what's in my heart.
Right.
Once I change what's in my heart, the number of guns in society is immaterial. Okay. On the one hand. On the other hand, and if I don't change what's in my heart, and we controlled every single gun in this society, and I got to be careful not to bang on my table because it starts shaking everything. If we controlled every single gun in this society, people will use machetes. If you controlled all of them, they'll use razor blades. They'll use baseball bats. What we have to recognize is that this has to change and not out there. I think that, and my last comment there, and if anybody else wants to join in here, please raise your hand. I think the last comment is our society, not just in terms of America, but in terms of the world, seems amazingly fractured and amazingly splintered. But I think that some of this is necessary for us to get to a point where we stop acting like a caterpillar and we start acting like a butterfly. That we stop acting like we're going to go back to the days when everything worked just really fine, and we're going to we don't have to worry about global warming. We don't have to worry about our suicide rate. We don't have to worry about our poverty and greed rates, etc. So as we're recognizing that things are splintering, we're not holding the energy of the status quo of what used to be. We're holding the energy of the butterfly. And we're going to talk about what that butterfly, this is going to be a great segue since I don't see any other hands going up. We're going to talk about that butterfly in, let's make this a 10-minute pause, okay? And we're going to talk about what are the elements of the society that we want to, that we're holding the vision for. How do we live in beauty? How do we live with, live on the planet with our hearts wide open? So I am going to call us back exactly 5 after the hour, and
Okay.
whatever your hour may be, and I will pause our recording also, and I will see everybody in 10 minutes.
Okay, let's.
Okay, so welcome back to the second half of our webinar. And this is the part where we're going to be a lot more interactive. I'm going to have us turning on our cameras and microphones and things like that. However, let me get a couple more things out of the way. So this section we're talking about our step 5, which is living in beauty. And what does that actually mean? This is something I heard when I was getting introduced to Native American wisdom and Native American cosmology of how, kind of being in the world. And one of the Native American elders was saying, may you always walk in beauty. May you always be living in beauty. And I was kind of like, well, what does that mean? Does that mean you have to have a nice big house? Does that I have a beautiful house? So that means I'm living in beauty, right? And no, it doesn't mean that at all. It means that we're living in a different way on the planet. We talked about this earlier with this video that I still can't get to work, and so I'll give you the link for it, of an encounter. Let's see what the name of it is again. Encountering another being. And if you do that, do a YouTube search, you should be able to find that. It's about 4 minutes long. And this guy is talking about, how do I live with my heart open in the face of another being? Most of us think that we have a relationship with life and with nature, but we only have a relationship with the life and the nature that we control. And when you're really truly in nature, you are not controlling it. Nature has its own way of being and its own way of controlling. I've been with beings all around the world that were beyond my control. They were bigger than me, more powerful than me, more wild than me. And it's really a profound experience when you are face to face with this being. Wild elephants in Sri Lanka, for example. Elephants in Sri Lanka have been known to kill people because the people are killing the elephants. It's amazing how that works. And just being face to face with no protection with this being that I know is big enough to kill me. And I'm holding in my heart and my mind the message, yes, you're magnificent, you're big enough to kill me, and I honor who you are. And obviously they didn't. Being with ants in a tropical country, just looking at them, looking at the absolute beauty of them, and looking at how they operate and how they live on the earth. If we have time, I'm going to ask you for your experiences of being in an unstructured nature, not with pets, not with domestic animals, but directly face to face, eye to eye with the wild. Right now, though, I'm going to move on because I want to get to this other stuff. I want to talk about the Society of the Heart, and I'm only going to talk about a little bit of it because a friend of mine by the name of Franca Baroni wrote a book called Cor Publicum, the public, that's Latin for the public heart. What she is saying in her book, and Franca is a lot of different things, including having 3 different international law degrees. Makes my one puny little law degree look insignificant. But she said that it's possible for us to have a government, a judicial system, a political system, a legislative system, all of which runs on heart energy, not head energy. We have become in this society overly focused on logic. Logic is really great. I really like it. I really like the stuff in my head. But I also am learning to like the stuff in my heart and to recognize that that heart consciousness can form the basis of an entirely different society that operates on different principles. Now, should it? I don't know the answer to that. It's not up to me to come up with the answer to that. It's up to us to have the discussions on how that could work. How can you have a society that is based on the energies that emanate from the heart, the energies of compassion, of tolerance, of patience, of goodwill, of generosity, of giving? How do you get to all that stuff? And what does the society look like? And what are the steps to get there? All of those are things that all of us need to be thinking out all together. But I would say that we at least need a blending of heart and logic, of head and heart, of logic and love, compassion coming from your heart. And if that is the case, if the heart stuff is important, how do we develop it? We've got hundreds, maybe thousands of schools spitting out more lawyers every year, more and more and more lawyers, all of us trained in how to deal with our heads. Why don't we have schools that are spitting out thousands and thousands of people who are going to be the administrators of a brand new society and trained in how to live in and deal with our hearts? Okay, I can keep going, and I won't, because it's now time for me to share a few things with you. And you will remember, and all of you are going to nod your head whether you did it or not. I feel like the teacher. Everybody did their homework, right? So your homework was to look at the 12 Global Challenges video so that you would be grounded in the issues of the 12 Global Challenges. So therefore, what we're going to do now is look at 2 elements of the 12 Global Challenges. One is, let's assume that everything goes haywire and all 12 of the global challenges hit all at the same time. What does the world that our children and our grandchildren will inherit from that mess? Okay. So I'm going to share my screen with you, I think. And I want to walk us through what that looks like. And I've got to pull us over here. So this is reminding you what the 12 global challenges are. And this is, excuse me, what the default future looks like. First, all 12 together. Here's some common collapse elements. While things are collapsing, lots of people take self-serving actions. I'm going to save me. I'm even going to profit from the collapse. By trying to do those things, they tend to make the collapse worse. Disrespecting each other and disrespecting each other's cultures. And we saw this some years ago when there was rioting in Los Angeles. It wasn't whites against blacks, and it wasn't Asians against Lithuanians. It was everybody against everybody else. And so instead of there being a mutual pulling together, there was a mutual pulling apart. People have bad theories about why things are working this way, and the bad theories make things worse. But by us not being able to see how bad the theory is, the things get worse. I can spend a lot of time talking about that. Willful ignorance, and this is I'm doing a writing right now talking about a different brand of ignorance on our planet. Not just that you're ignorant, it's that you actually want to be ignorant. And for those who are and you've heard of the flat earthers movement, people who, in complete defiance of all of the information we've collected over the last 1,000 years, they want to believe the earth is flat. And I don't care what your evidence is. I don't care anything I see. I don't care about anything. All I'm going to do is say these things because I have this tool now called the internet, and I can blab my theories out there to the world, and it doesn't matter. It does matter. It will make things a lot worse. There'll be people out there trying to manage collapse, and it's unmanageable. There are people out there who will be engaged in fragmented thinking. They're going to look at one of the challenges, like security or energy or economics. They'll try to fix that one, but the fix will make everything else worse. There'll be plenty of name calling, blaming, finger pointing. You people did this. All of us, I'm pointing to me, have to share the blame. And there's going to be a sense of defeat. Despair, numbing, drug taking, suicide. People will leave that situation. In terms of looking at the specifics of the 12 global challenges, on the security challenge, there'll be a collapse of security and general lawlessness. I was watching this happening in Buenos Aires when I was down there. The police were completely ineffective for doing anything. And this is true for lots of places in the world where policing has basically collapsed. And people, every few blocks, people would hire private security to basically patrol their street. And the private security would set up a roadblock in the middle of the street. And if you're trying to come down their street, they stop you. Where are you going? Why are you going there? They would wave you onto the next security checkpoint 2 blocks away. It takes forever to get places. Some of these folks were more heavy-handed than others. And it was a sense of general lawlessness and people taking the law in their own hands. Warlords, and this was definitely true in Camden and North Philadelphia when I was living there. You want to get from 21st and Norris to 22nd and Diamond, you got to go through 3 different territories, and you better know whose name to use when you're doing that. The creation of various military states. That's going to be the default option here in the United States. We will turn to the military to feed us, and we'll do what they tell us to do. And it may not be democracy, and they may not be in our best interest, but we like being fed. Those of us on the West Coast may be a little bit different, but maybe not that much. Acts of random and anonymous violence just goes up. In terms of water, maldistribution of water, too much in some areas. What people, the cities will be underwater, too little in others. People will be dying of thirst. We have toxic, poisoned water, and water will be used for profit. And this is something that they're suffering with in South Africa right now. If you've got money, you can find water. If you don't have money, there's no water for you, and the circumstances can be dire. And water wars. I've been in 2 locations where people can be fighting over water. One was in Sri Lanka, and we don't have time for me to talk about that one, but these are images of the Saishan Glacier. This is the largest amount of free water, of fresh water in the world that's not at the poles. This is in the Himalayas. I was up there at the 18,000-foot level and trying to breathe. And a man walked up behind me and he said, "You're looking at the place World War III will start." And I looked at him like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "There are 3 powers that want that glacier or are threatening each other with the glacier. And all 3 of them are nuclear powered." So right now it's in the hands of India, a nuclear power. The Chinese, another nuclear power, is threatening the folks in India. And Pakistan is right over that other hill over there, and they're threatening both of them. If you explode one nuclear bomb in that area, it will probably kill somewhere between 1 and 2 billion human beings. All of the major rivers in India, all of the major rivers in China are fed from this one glacier. Think of melting all of that water at once, and think about what would happen to the people who are downstream. We don't think about this because we're Americans and this doesn't impact us, but it would definitely impact us. So this is part of our 12 global challenges. Our food challenges: mass starvation, the collapse of the industrial food supply. We say all sorts of bad things about Monsanto and Archer Daniels Midland. If they go away tomorrow, tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of people around the world would starve. We have our work cut out for us, and we're not doing the work at all. Compromised health from food. Our food is actually making us sick. Starvation and obesity in this society, which is really interesting. Okay, so energy. The end of fossil fuels, increasingly toxic extraction of fuels, urban areas without electricity or fuel, and that's happening right now. Increasingly expensive energy. So those who have money will have energy, and those who don't will be living on the streets. We're living on the streets right now. Our health situation, the collapse of the healthcare system, it just dies from the magnitude of the strain that's on it. New diseases cropping up and old diseases becoming treatment resistant. Resistant pathogens increasingly expensive healthcare. In our political situation, the collapse of political systems, I remind people, when the Soviet Union collapsed, they had sent astronauts up into space. They left from one country and they landed in a different country. The country had literally changed the map, the political map had changed while they were up in space. That's how fast things can change. Corruption is rampant. Government is self-serving. There's a focus on illusory issues. In terms of economics, collapse of economic systems, we have a situation where we have people, the super rich, people who are richer than anything the world has ever seen. We don't even have, we can't even get our minds around how much money some of these individuals have. And now we've got the ultra poor, people where we can't get our minds around how poor people can be. Hyperinflation, and the world has seen hyperinflation before, and we can easily get back to that situation. In terms of education, we have a collapse of our educational systems. I was in Uganda years ago where the educational system had collapsed. Miseducation, and education where there are no values. Education that is too expensive. And if I keep giving side comments, I'm not going to get through this. I'm going to keep going here. So cities become uninhabitable. And there's climate collapse in terms of the ecological sphere. Media is untrustworthy. Again, this willful ignorance. We say things we know aren't true, and we don't care whether they're true or not. And dealing with false issues. In our spiritual cultural realm, depression, despair, and suicide, the big three. Drugs that either try to suppress depression, despair, and suicide, or contribute to it. Okay, so that's what the world looks like from the point of view of the default future. If we do nothing, that's the future we're looking at. In order for us to do something, what we've got to do is focus on these challenges and focus on each one of these challenges as a vision. So we need to take a look at our 12 global visions. And we're going to take a look at that right now. And I am going to do something right now. What I want you to do is turn your video on, not your audio, just the video. So we should start seeing a bunch of you popping up on the screen any minute now. And I'm seeing folks doing that. If for some reason you don't want to, you're in your bathrobe or whatever, you don't want to do that, it's okay. But if you can, because what I want you to do is, as I'm going through this, I want you to, I have something to add to this section here. So this is going to become interactive to the extent that you can be interactive. Okay. So I see a couple of us are here, and I'm going to go to our next screen share, which is our 12 global visions. And once again, we've got some default common, okay, hang on, I gotta do that. So our common visions, the commonality of this is, this is what our future looks like 100 years from now. So this is a 100-year vision. Respect and reverence for each one of these challenges. Stop talking about all this stuff as though these are problems. These are challenges, And we need to look at how this challenge is calling on us to rise to the occasion, as opposed to, oh, the ecology is all screwed up and it's all your fault. For us to be respectful for our future is going to help to change the future. No one profits from the continuance of the challenge. This is one of the biggest problems that we've got right now. We want to change all these things, so long as everybody who's making millions and billions of dollars continues to make their millions and billions of dollars. What I want us to do is to say, let's take this whole profit equation out of it. The folks who've made money, okay, you made money, good. But you shouldn't profit from the continuation of these problems. Where there are values-based solutions and visions, we know what our values are. I say every time we get together, my principal value, principal value of Common Way is inclusivity, of all of us being one. From that point of view, we can solve any problem. If I try to do a solution only based on what's good for me or good for my group or good for my for my followers, etc., then we're going to be in trouble. Our primary value is life. And I've talked about this already, so I'm not going to belabor the point, but corporations are not alive. If we have to destroy each and every corporation in order for us to foster life, then let's do it. There's nothing sacred about a corporation. And we need to have community-based solutions and visions, things that I can do inside my own community. Okay, so let's look at the 12 elements of the 12 global visions. And if you want something added to these 12 global visions, write it in the chat box. I'm pointing to the chat box. My chat box is over there. So write it in the chat box, or raise your hand and say, I want to add such and such, or I want to ask about such and such. Okay. So let's get going. So on the security, and again, this is a 100-year vision, 100 years from now. Greg and I probably are not going to see this. I'm speaking for Greg here, but I'm good for another. Who knows? By that time, maybe we'll have life extension to get me to 150 years old. But I'm assuming that we'll get along the way, but not get all the way. So in the security realm, nuclear weapons banned as immoral. These things are immoral. We should not own a singular nuclear weapon. We should apologize for actually having had them. Any country that has nuclear weapons should be ostracized to the point that they get rid of them. Okay, this is a crime against humanity and a crime against life. All military budgets shrink, but they don't shrink all the way, because I want the military to be there, because the military needs to be repurposed. And I'm writing that down because I forgot to put it in that box right there. Okay, so I'm the first one to add something to the to our list here. I did add it. Okay, military is repurposed for life-enhancing missions and long-term restoration. Don't get rid of them. Give them a life-enhancing mission. No one is allowed to profit by selling weapons. That will take the number of weapons out of the world significantly. No one is allowed by selling violence, either real violence or simulated violence. I'm thinking about violent video games, violent television shows, violent movies, etc. And to have a violence tax on video games, movies, um, and things like that, so that we take the glorification out of the violence, we stop people from trying to profit from violence, making money from violence. Um, Billy, I'll get you in a second. Okay. And we take, again, just take violence, take the thrill of violence out of the picture. And in the United States, all guns should be registered to militias, to actually read what the Second Amendment says. Okay, so Billy, I think I can unmute you, or you're unmuting yourself. And so, yes.
Yeah. So the one thing that I was just hearing was the violence tax. But the thing about that is it comes down to who enforces that, who decides on what is considered violence and what is considered activism, for that matter.
Right.
You know, what is considered, you know, oppositional compared to violence. So there has to be freedom of speech, freedom of oppositional forces, and I totally understand the violence in video games and stuff like that being taxed to a point, but you see where I'm coming from, where like it's a very thin line that we would be treading on, and that we could talk about it for a long time. I just want to throw that out there before we get too far off of it.
No, and I think that
it's subjective, Zon.
I think that you are absolutely right. I'm very happy that you brought it up. I wrote it down, and you're right. This is something. Yeah, right. So this is definitely something that we need to be talking about. I think that you're absolutely correct, and we actually need to understand what violence means. I am not talking about getting rid of NFL football. They can get out on that field and bash themselves to their heart's content. That's not violence. Violence is when you are treating a living being like an object. And when we do that, we start looking at things in a really different way. Billy, I'm going to ask you to mute yourself again, because I'm getting a lot of background noise.
Oh yeah, I'll turn off that fan.
Okay. No, just mute yourself. And actually, he did. And so, there are people who are going to try to go again, what I think is too far. I've never been a hunter, but I have been a target shooter. I like target shooting. I don't have a problem with guns. I don't own any, but I don't have a problem with guns. The problem is when we start pointing those guns at other human beings in anger. And that's so this is something we need to have a lot of conversation about, and we need to come together and create community standards on this. This is the kind of conversation that I want to see us have in the Imaginal Cafe. Okay. And one more point.
And I totally agree with you that there should be standards. And I want to come back to the difference between logical and emotional. And when there is that emotional disconnect between, like, logically, yeah, there should be people that are able to go hunt and da-da-da-da-da. But when there is an emotional disconnect between the violence that we see on the streets or violence that we see in mass shootings is what we need to focus on, instead of the necessarily logical solutions of taxation on violence or control mechanisms. It's more about getting to the heart of the problem and the root of what we're actually going for, which is an emotional transformation, which is an emotional reconnection, because that emotional reconnection is I think or emotional disconnection is what's causing a lot of this, a lot of these, travesties, these traumatic events. And so I loved when you talked about getting away from logic and more into heart intelligence. And I don't want to talk too much, but that is such a essential point that I think we need to continue to hash out and reaffirm in our society. Like, I think that I'm just going to throw this out real quick before I get off, is that, like, dams, right? Dams that blocked waterways and created man-made lakes, were like this logical thing for electricity, but hardly any of them even create electricity. And that is exactly what we're doing with prisons, is creating public safety, even though it just makes public safety worse. And like, this is kind of the logic versus emotional argument that I've found, is that, like, we create these human levers to control nature, and it's and it goes against our emotional conscious.
And I'm
so
gonna.
I'm done.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you to get done. Okay, and one of our challenges, your challenge and mine, is you bring up some really good points. These are things that I want us to have lots and lots of time to talk about, which is not tonight. Okay, so why don't you go ahead and remute
I'm sorry,
yourself? Yeah. No, please don't apologize for being right. Okay. The one thing I would add is, you're talking about this emotional disconnect. I believe that it's also a spiritual disconnect. And anybody who gets up in a mall and pulls out an automatic weapon and starts spraying bullets around has some very serious heart problems. Okay, now all that was number one. We got 11 more to go, so let me get moving here. In terms of water, our vision is that water is something that is local, sustainable, healthy, and non-industrial. We have one of the greatest watersheds here in the Portland area. We don't allow human beings to walk in it. Okay, the Bull Run watershed. I'm one of the few people, because one of my clients, my inclusivity clients, was the water department. One of the few people who actually got the chance to walk in and see the watershed. It's all up in the hills are the one that keeps the water pure. Portland's fed by gravity. It's really hard to turn the system off. And it's just really, it makes a lot of sense. Everybody should be that way. Oh, our water is non-fluoridated also. Our water sources should be diverse. Water is something that you should not profit from. You shouldn't try to profit from it. This should be, there's so much that should just be public service. Take the profit motive out of it. Okay, so I did that really quickly. If there's anything you want to add in terms of water or talking about water, use your chat box, raise your hand. Moving on to food. Food is local, sustainable, healthy, and non-industrial. There are countries that have achieved this. I'm thinking particularly about New Zealand, where you just got great food. It's all grown right there. They are very serious about keeping their food supply pure and healthy, etc. So it can be done. There's a great diversity of food. There's a term that's come up that's called food deserts, where you where there's only one kind of food that's available, or only fast food is available. Camden, New Jersey is a city that has no supermarkets in it. Okay, so all of your food comes from fast food. Okay, or you leave the city to do your shopping. All food producers share in the profits from food production. The idea that I am the owner of the land, so therefore I'm the only one who should get profits from the production of food is ludicrous. Everybody who helps to produce the food, from the landowner to the farm worker to the place where the food is stored, etc., all should share in the profits from the food production. I saw these systems exist right now in the world. I saw this with my own two eyes in Venezuela. I also saw this in some of the towns on the outskirts of Rio de Janeiro, where there are producer-consumer cooperatives. Everybody sets the price. They set a fair price for everything. If I'm the food producer, and if I can make more money by selling outside the market, I agree to sell inside the market. If I'm a food consumer and I can get cheaper food by going over there to the supermarket, I'm going to agree to buy from my system because I want the system to be strong. Where there's a promotion of healthy and sustainable lifestyles, if we know that there is food that is damaging our health, how in the world do we allow it to be advertised? Why don't we tax it? Why don't we tax it to the point that they realize they need to go into a different business? Some of you may know this already, but Kentucky Fried Chicken is one of the kind of the big fast food operations, and started by a guy who called himself the Colonel Sanders. And Colonel Sanders was a committed vegetarian. He would not eat the crap that he sold. He insisted that all of his senior managers for Kentucky Fried Chicken be vegetarians. If they weren't vegetarians, he let them go. He thought people who ate his food were crazy. He shouldn't have been allowed to sell the stuff. And so, yeah, that's an interesting challenge. Okay, in terms of energy, energy is generated locally, it's generated sustainably, it's not fossil-based, and it's not industrial-based. Fossil fuels should only be used for critical needs and for long-term needs. We should be recognizing this stuff is precious. It's not just a commodity. Fossil fuels should be taxed, and should be taxed to the point that that non-fossil fuels start looking good in terms of our use of them. No one should be allowed from producing, transporting, or utilizing fossil fuels. Internal combustion engines should be outlawed except for critical functions. Energy production, transmission, and consumption should be based on the new ecological realities. I think all of us know the situation they've got in Northern California right now, where they're shutting down the electrical grid because they're afraid of wildfires. Well, if you put the lines underground, you don't have to worry about wildfires. Now, it costs a lot of money to put the lines underground. Spend it. It's like, what else are we going to spend it on? We have a whole new reality. Spend the money, okay? And I don't see anybody writing anything into the chat box here. So if you've got some ideas along these lines, you may need to add something. Okay, continuing on. health, we need to be about enhancing health, not just managing symptoms. I don't watch television. I don't watch much of it. Not past Perry Mason. Okay. But even when I watch even a basketball game or whatever, there are all these commercials on about, do you have the symptoms of such and such? Buy such and such, or tell your doctor to prescribe for you such and such. And all this is we need to get away from that and recognize, rather than managing my diabetes, I need to get rid of my diabetes. Instead of managing my heart situation with such and such a pill, I need to get rid of that heart situation. No one profits from pain, sickness, and suffering. Now that's a big, when you look at all the people right now who profit from pain, sickness, and suffering, this is a major part of our gross domestic product. It's getting late. What we need to be doing is saying, take the profit motive completely out of it. So no one is profiting from this situation. Where we have community-based health systems, these large mega systems are not the national hospitals and national insurance companies, etc. Billy, let me get to the end of my list here. Focusing on indigenous and native and natural health and healing. There's there are these there's lots and lots of indigenous ways of knowing that in this society we want to push right past all this stuff because I want to take a pill. And we need to honor the fact that we've already got the knowledge that's going to fix all the problems. And then the last point in health is spiritual, emotional, psychological aspects of health and healing. Billy, I'm going to unmute you, or you unmuting yourself.
All right, I'll try to be quick about it. So I think that we talked about collective food systems, and the fact that there's one in Olympia, where I'm from, collective, aka a collective market where you can work to get your groceries cheaper, and the community kind of supports one another to meet each other's needs. Well, we need to do something similar. Okay, this is how I see it. There's two options for like healthcare, or like for a lot of problems. We do it ourselves together, or we wait for someone to do it for us by asking and hoping. And the collective is like, we could do collective healthcare. We could do collective where small groups of people, maybe 1,000 or less, are together. But when there is a health issue, and what this comes back to is the tribal kind of intelligence that we've lost, where individuality has taken over, where instead of caring for one another, instead of like surrounding the weakest member of the tribe,
I'm reining you back in. Okay. So you are absolutely right. And that comment, we're not waiting for others to give us an answer. We're doing the answer ourselves. And the answers are local, and these locals will start sharing local information. I'm going to put that in our first slide for the collective vision is we're doing all this stuff ourselves. Okay. Moving along. I am going. it looks like we're not going to get all these slides done by 9 o'clock. I'm going to suggest for those of us who can hang on for till 5 or maybe even 10 after the hour, I'll be as expeditious as possible, but kind of keep going. Okay, politics. In the politics sphere, governance is at the lowest possible level, and I could talk about that until the cows come home. And I don't have any cattle, so I'm going to move right along. Direct politics, meaning that we get beyond representational politics, that people are running for an office. We have the technology now to vote directly on the issues that are mattering to us. Pollsters have realized that. I think it's time for the rest of us to realize it. Sortition, meaning we select our legislatures the way we select our grand juries. We just name people to be on it, as opposed to doing all this voting stuff that can be so easily corrupted. We focus on real issues and not the junk that seems to come our way with our current political system. And then we what I call minding our own business. Our politics get really local. We let other countries to solve their own disputes. It looks like China and Vietnam are about to get twitchy over the South China Sea. Okay, I don't want to see that happen. I wish they wouldn't. I'm not going to, why should we be involved in that? Why should we send military people over there? We don't live in the South China Sea. We should mind our own business. Okay, moving along. Economics. The economics is based on the concept of enoughness, that I know how much is enough for me, and I stop when I get enough. Economics is based on love and compassion, and some of you have heard me talk about Mark Anielski's book, The Economics of Happiness, where we can have an economic system that's not based on money. It's based on happiness and deep fulfillment. Where money addiction is treated as a disease. Money addiction is the only addictive substance where the control of the addictive substance is in the hands of the addicts themselves. Economic efficiency is measured by full engagement, not increasing wealth for rich people. And we focus on local markets, not on these grand, and actually what a market was considered was what was happening in your local area. We need to get back to that notion. And finally, money as a tool, not a value. Okay. In terms of education, our education system has to have a value structure. And right now it doesn't. And we've got people, we're pumping people out into the educational system, out of the educational system without any sense of values. And the educational system should be based on the value of a world for all beings. That education should enhance our spiritual and our universal values, so that we recognize that life is a basic fundamental value, and that should be the thing that drives all of our life. All of our human life should be about enhancing all life on this planet, and if there's life on other planets, enhancing that too. And the end of an industrial-based education. The educational system, especially the K through 12 system, is geared toward putting young people as the cogs into an industrial machine. I learned things like typesetting and printing, carpentry, etc. in high school. And the reality was there aren't any jobs like that anymore. Okay, so why don't we have an educational system that is based on the reality that people will be finding right now, a new kind of agriculture, for example, a new kind of way of looking at a technology output, etc. In terms of habitat, we need to redesign and restructure our cities. This is a 100-year goal. Our shorter term goal, our next 5 years, 10 years, etc., is to get rid of homelessness altogether. So as Georgina was saying, zero suicide, I'm saying zero homelessness. None of our leaders is saying that right now. I just said it, and I think that that's something that we as a society can start steering ourselves towards. All housing is public housing. See, the problem is we've been trying to house just poor people in public housing. It's a bad idea across the board. I can tell you all the ways it's a bad idea. What I'm suggesting is the Singapore model, where they just said, we're going to build housing for everybody. We're going to build houses for the poorest of the poor. We're going to build houses for middle-class people. We're going to build houses for rich people. And if you're super rich, you may want to build your own house, but you may want to live in one of our houses. And by doing that, Singapore had the worst slums in the world. You can see videos on how bad the Singapore slums were. Now they have none. They have no homeless people. And some of the houses that they have for middle class and above people are really, really cool. I would like to live there. Housing and services should be based on the ability for people to pay and their ability to contribute to society. And cities should be based on new ecological realities, like, for example, critical infrastructure should be underground. Cars should be limited, and we're getting close. So doing some interesting experiments here in Portland with all of the publicly available bicycles, scooters, etc. that's going around here. You're getting close to the point where you don't need a car to get around. Okay. In terms of the ecological realm, and I feel a sneeze coming off. In terms of the ecological realm, all of our human systems and structures should be focused on healing the earth. If we've got a system or a structure that does not heal the earth, we shouldn't do it. Period. I don't care how much money you make. I don't care how much what you're doing. You've got to find a way to do that thing in a healing way. Right now, if you want to, you don't dig for gold anymore. You actually take chemicals and you can melt and dissolve the entire mountain that the gold is sitting in and pick out the little bits of gold from the dissolved mountain. Now, this is ecologically sinful. It's immoral. And just because people make money from it is not a reason to continue that kind of a practice. It just shouldn't be allowed, and I don't care who's making money from it, and I don't care how much money they're making from it. The earth is going to heal all on its own as soon as we stop doing the harmful things to it. And then we tax all behaviors that disrupt the earth systems. And as Billy was saying earlier, we're going to have to talk about that, because what are the behaviors that are disrupting earth systems? What are the things we can agree on? What are some of the things that we may not agree on? You may have heard recently that California has adopted a law that says by X time you can't sell animal products, animal furs, etc., in the state of California. I don't know about that. I'm not in favor of animal products. I don't have a mink coat over there. I don't believe in them, but I'm not sure that that's getting to the right point. I'm not sure that's really affecting the ecology the way that we're talking about. Okay, and then if you're dumping carbon in the atmosphere, you should be taxed for that. How we do that, again, we'd have to see how that happens. Okay, we're getting close to the end. In terms of media, news provide, and this is our vision, is that news provides relevant, accurate, timely, positive, authentic information. News is a non-profit service. Once you take the money out of it, you take out the need to sensationalize the news, to sell more advertising, etc. And that's a priority for positive, visionary information. We should have positive news outlets. And there's one I just discovered today. See if I can find this really, really quickly. I can actually put this in myself. It's called Beautiful News. And I am putting this, it's not cooperating. I am putting this in the chat. And this is another reason why I shouldn't do it, because I stopped progress for everybody else. And finally, well, media is tied to education. So what you're seeing in the media and what you're seeing in your educational system should align with each other. And education should be tied to our societal needs and visions. From the time that they're in 6th or 7th grade, every kid needs to see the 12 global challenges. Every kid should be recognizing that by the time they get into high school, if such a thing exists as high school, that they should know which ones of these challenges they want to grapple with, where in the world they want to have an experience, how they want to do this thing, etc. Finally, spiritual and cultural challenges. We need a society that's based on common universal values, and that is simply not true in our society anymore. It's not true in the world anymore, and we need to make that true again. People practice deep fulfillment instead of practicing deep entertainment. People are feeling fulfilled in their in connecting with themselves and connecting with each other. Okay, so let me, and I timed that fairly well, and we needed an extra few minutes. Let me stop the sharing here. And I had wanted to have a little bit more time for us to have a little bit more interaction, but we got a little, we did get a little bit in. I'm going to I've been putting these webinars on for the last few months now, and I've been enjoying the conversations, and I've been enjoying the interactions, and I've been enjoying getting a body of material into video form. I think it's time for you to suggest what our next topics need to be, and see how we come together on those. So if you want to write to me, you can, Shariff@commonway.org. I think most of you have my email address. That's right. I'm just saying this for the people in the videos also. Shariff@commonway.org. And you can say, you know, we need to talk more about this one of the 12 global challenges, or how we answer our spiritual needs in the society that we've got nowadays, or any of the other topics that we can possibly deal with. I'm looking forward to hearing from you with regard to that. I will have another topic and another another opportunity for us to come together in November. I'm looking to, I would like to do, instead of, you know, this 2-hour format, I'd like to have an ongoing relationship. And ongoing relationships takes ongoing money. So we're going to find out how we do that. Do we find foundation money to keep this going? Do people pay for the elements, etc.? Okay, I'm done for the night. For those of you who are still not, if you want to turn your video on, if you want to turn your microphone on so we can say goodbye to each other, that would be good. And here we come up, and this is taking most of us. And make sure you unmute yourself so I can hear you say goodbye. And I'm looking forward to us doing this again at some point in time. So thank you and good night. And I'm looking forward to our next connections with each other. So good night. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good evening.
Okay,
Night.
see you. Yep.